Cheddar Gorge, one of Britain's favourite beauty spots, and the jewel in Somerset's crown. Located at the foot of the Mendip Hills, the picturesque village of Cheddar attracts hundreds of thousands of tourists every year, with its iconic cliffs and caves, its warm and friendly shops and cafes, and not forgetting its famous export, cheddar cheese.
Couldn't resist, but it was over 100 years ago that cheddar, as in the place rather than the cheese, began making its way into fiction as well, as it inspired one of the greatest storytellers who ever lived, JRR Tolkien. Such a beautiful spot, isn't it? I never get tired of those views. And it's such a perfect spot to come, relax, and indulge in a good book.
At Helm's Gate, before the mouth of the deep, there was a heel of rock thrust outward by the northern cliff. There, upon its spur, stood high walls of ancient stone, and within them was a lofty tower. The Hornburg it was called, for a trumpet sounded upon the tower, echoed in the deep, as if armies, long forgotten, were issuing to war from caves beneath the hills.
I used to love reading The Lord of the Rings as a child, and naturally that love then transferred onto Peter Jackson's masterpiece of a cinema trilogy. And one scene in particular always had me on the edge of my seat. The Battle of Helm's Deep.
So it begins.
An incredibly memorable scene, Saruman's army of 10,000 strong Uruk-haien orcs against so few men and elves. Their fate set at the Rohan fortress of Hornburg in the valley of the White Mountains. Our beloved characters given no other choice but to stand and fight.
It was a powerful scene of both page and screen, and it was the cliffs behind me and the caves beneath them that inspired it all.
The year was 1916, when a newly married John Ronald Reuel Tolkien would visit the village of Cheddar for the first time, whilst on his honeymoon with his wife Edith, who would go on to be an inspiration herself, actually, for the character Arwen, Aragorn's elven love interest. But the love for his surroundings was also clearly starting to blossom.
Well, it's a visit that clearly had its impact on Tolkien, because he would return to this area some 20 years later in 1940. Only his interest this time, we think, was on the caves.
Goff's Cave would become the glittering caves of Aglarond when The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, was published in 1954. Here's how they were described by the character Gimli.
Strange are the ways of men, Legolas. Here they have one of the marvels of the northern world. And what do they say of it? Caves, they say. Caves. Holes to fly to in time of war, to store fodder in. My good Legolas, do you know that the caverns of Helm's Deep are vast and beautiful? There would be an endless pilgrimage of dwarves merely to gaze at them, if such things were known to be. And plink, a silver drop falls, and the round wrinkles in the glass make all the towers bend and waver like weeds and corals in a grotto of the sea. Then evening comes, they fade and twinkle out. Our torches pass on into another chamber and another dream. There is chamber after chamber, Legolas, hall opening out of hall, dome after dome, stair beyond stair, and still the winding paths lead on into the mountain's heart. Caves, the caverns of Helm's Deep. Happy was the chance that drove me there. It makes me weep to leave them.
You almost don't need my pictures to imagine what these beautiful caves look like. The words do it wonderfully. And the one person that picked up on Gimli's eulogy was the critic P. Rourke. And Tolkien wrote back to him, addressing that in 1971.
I was most pleased by your reference to the description of glittering caves. No other critic, I think, has picked it out for the special mention. It may interest you to know that the passage was based on the caves at Cheddar Gorge and was written just after I had revisited these in 1940, but was still coloured by my memory of them much earlier before they became so commercialised. I had been there during my honeymoon nearly 30 years before.
And that single letter from Tolkien meant that Cheddar Gorge and Caves was one of the very few places in the UK that Tolkien acknowledged as a direct inspiration for a location in Middle-earth. You have the setting of the gorge for the Valley of the White Mountain and Helm's Gate, and then the glittering caves of Aglarond as the place of refuge behind the Hornburg. Oh, to have been in the great man's mind when he was being inspired by this gorgeous, wonderful place. It must have been something truly very magical.